Okay. So I'm going to start. I'm going to say good evening, everyone, and welcome to this, which is the first event in the Tree Council's Art and Culture Festival for National Tree Week. My name is Sarah Lom, and I'm CEO of the Tree Council, which is the charity that brings everybody together for the love of trees. We're delighted tonight to welcome our four fabulous artists who you can see here on the screen with me. And I'm going to ask each of them just to raise their hand when I say their name. So we have Suffolk Gallery owner Susie Turner, artist and historian Dr. Angela Summerfield, founder of the Arborealists Philippa Beale, and Faversham painter Angela Rumble. And a warm welcome also to Professor Charles Watkins, who's going to be our chair tonight. You'll be hearing more from the panel in just a moment. But before then, just one item of housekeeping. If you have any questions, do pop them into the Q&A, and there will be an opportunity right at the very end for some of those to be answered by the panel. So thank you, everyone, artists and you, the audience. Thanks for your fabulous support for the Tree Council and for the trees. And now it's time to settle comfortably into your chairs. And I'm going to hand over to Charles Watkins, who's Professor of Rural Geography at the University of Nottingham. But Charles has a million talents beyond geography. He's the author of a wide range of books on trees and historic landscapes, including an exquisitely illustrated and really, really readable book called Art in Trees, which celebrates the myth and magic of trees through the centuries. It's one of my really very favorite books for browsing, so I thoroughly recommend it. Charles is going to set us off on our journey tonight with a reflection on how trees have been rendered by artists through the centuries. So over to you, Charles.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for that very warm welcome. And it's great to meet the other panelists here too as well. I'm going to be talking for about 8 or 9 minutes about a few pictures, paintings of trees by artists. And I think we're going to be showing, so I'm hoping that my picture will become very small now, and we're going to be able to see some pictures of trees, and we'll talk about them. The first one is by Peter Bruegel the Younger of about 1620. Now, I came across this in the gallery in Birmingham on the university campus. I was actually early for a meeting, and I went into that wonderful gallery there and was looking around as one does, and I came across this, and I hadn't seen it there before. And what fascinated me is because I'm interested in the way that trees are managed. I do a lot of work on nature conservation of trees and the history of trees in the landscape. But of course, artist representations of trees are often decried by some people because they simply say, oh, well, it's just an artistic representation. It doesn't depict what was really going on in the past I'm talking about here. But this one struck me immediately. It's two people in the foreground bundling up some faggots, a faggot, and you can see the cut branches. But then fascinating to me in the background, and it's better in this illustration than it was in the painting, which was cleaned after I first saw it. You can see the chap, I think it is a man, climbing a ladder, cutting off the branch for the fuel wood. And this seemed to capture in a moment in time the importance of trees for fuel, winter fuel, and how important that is. But interestingly, the art historical description of the tree was concerned about the way that the man on the left represented gluttony and the one on the right something else. And what they were actually doing, the physical work in the woods, was not mentioned at all. So I thought that was rather interesting. The next image I've got is perhaps by wonderful Thomas Gainsborough. We're thinking about Suffolk later, but this is one of his views of Herefordshire, beech trees at Foxley, done in 1760. And two things here is worth pointing out. One is that wonderful pair of beech trees in the middle. But then if you look at the left, again, you will see a tree which has been heavily pollarded and where it's beginning to shoot, the branches are going to go out. So you'll see I've got a sequence of images here where trees are being managed for fuel or for timber in various ways, and how artists can capture that very effectively and also, of course, beautifully as well. The next slide is just also to show that how people learned how to draw trees. This is from Alexander Cousin's uh, uh, sort of little booklet of 1771, The Shape, Skeleton and Foliage of 32 Species of Trees for the Use of Painting and Drawing. So, of course, you have paintings who are painters who are painting en plein air, and people who are also doing that, but also perhaps on a cold evening, looking through these little guidebooks on how to draw trees and how to fit them into the landscape. And what's rather interesting here, you have the fully grown elm on the left, for example, and the lopped elm on the right. Elms were heavily lopped and for fodder and all sorts of other reasons in the up until the end of the 18th century in this country. Going to Germany, the next slide, so this rather terrifying, I always find, this picture by Caspar David Friedrich, Hat in the Snow, with these forbidding overgrown pollards. Well, they're not really overgrown. That's what one art historian described them as overgrown, but I think they're just about to be cut perhaps this winter in 1827. But of course, they're not only, so it's a productive landscape of trees, but it's also a rather threatening one, I always think. It's almost as like one of those Ovid stories where people have been frozen trying to escape, or possibly the trees are coming to attack us in this image. Moving on to a very different image, and again, of course, with East Anglian connections, but why do I say that? Or London connections? Because this is Constable's wonderful view of Salisbury Cathedral down 1831, 1832, that sort of period, seem to be threatening the clouds. But also, if you look closely, the different trees here. On the right, there's the little willow there that's been pollarded. Just behind it, the Lombardy poplar, which had been introduced in the 1770s. Those are relatively easy to identify. The tree on the left, if one reads histories of the painting, it's been called an elm. I think someone called it an oak. I think it's an ash, largely because it's an ash tree. It's exactly the same as the form and shape of an ash tree on Hampstead Heath, which Constable drew in a few years before. And this shows how artists can, as it were, use pictures and images of trees and put them in paintings from different places to make a picture. So here, that ash actually is from Hampstead Heath, but it's been put in a painting of Salisbury. The next slide is showing it's a Monet just near his house, his new house he had bought in France, and he went around the area drawing pictures of the trees. And this shows the trees that have all been cut back the branches, and then below at the bottom of the trees you can see the clusters of the branches, and then in the foreground, I mean, it's virtually an industrial process here. In the foreground you see the fencing which has been made from the branches from the trees. So this is a productive landscape. And then I've just got two more pictures. The next one is really a remarkable tree by not a very well-known artist, a chap called David Bates, who I think he did a lot of painting for the Worcester Royal Porcelain Factory in the 19th century, but some lovely landscapes which have still come up for sale, reasonably priced. But this is called Stacking the Oak Fence. Well, what on earth's going on? And this is actually history books and forestry texts never describe this, but this shows exactly how people who stripped the bark from the oaks in the background, the bark was very, very valuable for tanning and for tannin and for tanning leather. You see they're lining them up on a little scaffolding and row of these so they dry, and when they're dried they can be transported and of course are much lighter. So this is a very effective description of a sort of forgotten rural practice. And then the last slide I've got is bringing us slightly more up to date. Michael Rothenstein's rather cheeky and hilarious picture, slightly sub-surreal picture of timber felling 1945. And when I initially saw this, I thought 1945 with those steam engines, what he's sort of completely, he's got his chronology completely wrong. But a friend of mine, Brian Short, who's writing a history of agriculture in the Second World War, pointed out to me, he said, "Oh no, Charles, they were using steam engines. They were brought back into action for timber movement in the Second World War." And this was for a series called Essex, for the Essex School Series. And it's a lithograph and was sent round to schools. And I love the way here, the red marks of the hollow interiors of the oak mimic the wheels of the tractors, the steam engines there. So that's, I think, just to show you very quickly the way that one can look at art and to look at various aspects. Now, to bring us more up to date, I'm now going to ask Susie, because I've been tasked with chairing these 4 wonderful artists. Susie Turner of Gallery East at Woodbridge, and Susie is going to be talking about an exhibition which is, I think, opening this weekend. Susie. Susie's going to be showing some pictures from her gallery and from this show.
Can you hear?
Here we are, Susie. Yeah. All you've got to do is unmute yourself, and then there we are. Thank you very much, Susie.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Charles, and delighted to be taking part in this panel discussion today, and a real thanks to Holly and Dom particularly for getting this all organised and inviting us to be part of this. So yes, we have an exhibition called The Narrative of Trees, launching today to coincide with National Tree Week. And we're very excited about this exhibition. We're partnering with the Arborealist group of artists who you'll hear from later on, and Dr. Angela Summerfield, who's on the panel as well, has been helping us with the curation of this exhibition. And it's an exhibition featuring over 50 works by some 12 artists from East Anglia, from London, from Oxfordshire, from Gloucestershire. And I suppose, why did we decide in the beginning to have this exhibition about trees? I guess we've always been drawn to trees at Gallery East. I think every single exhibition that we've had since we started 18 months ago has included some tree paintings, including our abstract show, which was a women's abstract show called Surface. And even then, there were many works that featured trees. And sometimes people think that abstract work isn't about anything at all, but actually, as many of you know, abstract work is really inspired often by the landscapes, and trees are obviously part of that. I think the other reason why an exhibition on trees and the stories around trees appeals right now is that with the current pandemic and the fact that we are limited in what we can do, many people are choosing to spend much more time outside, going for walks. And I think people are rediscovering their local trees. And certainly in Suffolk, where we are, we have some marvellous trees here. We have 300-year oak trees called Staverton Thicks. We have an eroding coastline, so we have tall pines perched precariously on the edges of those cliffs. So lots of diversity of trees and lots of opportunities for artists to paint and represent trees in many different ways. I guess one of my favourite artists is Paul Nash, who is a modernist British painter. And we might just skip to the slide, actually. Yes, yes. Some of you will recognise this, this picture. So Paul Nash, born in 1889, died just after the end of the Second World War, was one of our most admired, I think, landscape painters, and often he painted trees. Now, his trees, of course, are always bare. There is never any foliage. They stand upright and lonely, usually in a landscape completely devastated by the destruction of war around. And I particularly love this work because it's called We Are Making a New World, 1918, and I love the hope it embodied in that work. And just a final thought from me. I was talking to my dad about joining this panel, and I said I really wanted to say something about Paul Nash. And he showed me, I'm just going to show you this Penguin Modern Masters book on Paul Nash, which he very proudly said he bought when he was 17 or 18 years old for 3 shillings and 6pence. And it really is a marvellous book. In fact, as many of you know, it's a marvellous series, this, which Penguin published just after, I think, 1944. But the point of this book and the point of this series was that Penguin wanted to bring some uplift and wanted something to revive the nation's soul after the devastation and change brought about by the horrors of the Second World War. So I guess bringing it right up to date now, these last 5 months have been very tough for people, and I'm sure I'm not alone in wanting to make a real plea for us to support the arts, whether it's art, poetry, theatre, music, because I do think it's got a real place in the nation's soul. So hats off to the Tree Council for building in culture, a culture programme around the work that they're doing. So I think that's all.
Thank you very much, Susie. That's great. Thank you very much. And now we'll move on straight away to Angela Summerfield, who's going to take us through the artistic process through her sketchbooks.
Okay, and I hope that my images are going to be coming up as if by magic. So I hope that's great. Okay. Okay, so taking the cue from Susie, so let's head off now and wander amongst the trees. As well as exploring forests, woods and arboreta, my drawings include responses to trees in my own garden. This photograph shows part of my garden in early autumn. As you can see, we have mature trees to which we've added over 50 trees ourselves during the last 6 years to create a parkland type garden, mini orchard and woodland, with the aim to encourage wildlife and create aesthetic possibilities for paintings. Our trees include lime, beech, ash, oak, horse chestnut, poplar, alder, silver birch, field maple, hawthorn, rowan, spindle, various conifers, fruit trees, and Japanese flowering trees. Now, how do I move on to the next image? Is it next image? Can we have the next image? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start by showing a group of colour chalk pastel and black Conte pencil drawings. This first drawing features a Scots pine, and we have the next image, please.
Angela, could I just ask you to turn on your camera so that people can see you?
Where would that be? Start my video. Yes, okay. That's it. Can they see me? That's it. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this painting shows a related work, an oil painting. It's part of an ongoing series entitled Tree Nature Portraits. Here you can see that colours have been transposed in the studio so as to explore ideas about individual identification with nature and emotional engagement. So if I can have the next two images, please. Okay. So this image and the next one are types of drawings accompanied by brief handwritten notes as to the season, time of day, climatic conditions, date drawn, and my thoughts, such as here, fragile, and the next work, openness. While recognizably figurative, these drawings of trees, in this instance, a lime and an ash, explore both the temporal and imaginative nature of art. I'm now going to show a series of pencil drawings. Next image, please. Just stop on this one. The first of which is a pencil drawing of a decaying tree which has lost its bark. The early 20th century artist Paul Nash, who we've just heard about, referred to such trees as fossil trees. And in creating my own drawing, I was responding to ideas of trees bearing witness and ecological issues. So this drawing was finished off in the studio and given the title, The History of the World According to Trees. Okay, next image, please. Okay, another aspect of trees which draws us to them is their anthropological structure. And here we have an A4 size drawing of a silver birch, which is a response to the poet Coleridge's often quoted praise of this species as the Lady of the Woods. And if we can have the next two images, please. Not forgetting the gentleman, of course, we also have two drawings of the king of the forest, the oak. And if we just go on to the next image, please. That's it, you stop there. And here we have another tree nature portrait to show again that observation and feeling in sketchbook drawings are only a starting point for studio paintings, which aim for a reflective and icon-like relationship with the viewer. I'm now going to show you three color pencil drawings of the same hornbeam tree. So if you just go on to the third one, please, which show how shape and growth patterns of a tree can be explored through drawings. Our experience of trees, particularly when we walk, can also be thought of as a continuous tree line. Next image, please. And this color chalk pastel and black Conte pencil drawing is an example of a contour of trees, recalling the 20th century artist Paul Klee's advice to artists to take a drawn line as though for a walk across the page. If I could have the next image, thank you. Trees can appear en masse and appear to lose their individual identity, in this instance here as a copse on a heath. This is an example of a panoramic conceived pencil drawing on 2 pages. And if I can have the next image, please. Thank you. Is a colored chalk pastel drawing of boundary trees, where what has interested me here is the drama of light just before a storm. Next image, please. I'm including this pencil drawing by contrast to show how an A6 pocket-sized sketchbook can be used to draw a single tree. Next image, please. Thank you. Trees viewed at dusk is another aspect to my work. This drawing shows a nocturnal mass of trees in black Conte, which is part of an ongoing series. This drawing, as the handwritten note indicates, is also a visual dialogue with the art of the past. In this instance, the French artist Seurat, who was celebrated for his late 19th century contre-jour drawings at dusk. Contre-jour meaning studying forms against the light. You just stop here. Oh, yes, next one, please. Sorry. Next, thank you. These, this painting and the next one show these 2 oil paintings showing how ideas of dusk are being transposed into paintings. So I can just have the next image as well, please. Thank you. And then on to the next painting, please. Thank you, I'll stop there. This painting, entitled The Forest Music, makes use of the silver birch drawing, which I shall shortly show you next, and was inspired by a walk through an ancient woodland, and includes, as you can see, young and decaying trees with fungi on the right and roe deer in the center. So this painting celebrates the life cycle of the woodland. The coloured stained glass effect in the background came about by studying, through drawing, the spaces and qualities of light between tree branches, and then back in the studio, associating these aesthetic possibilities with spiritual experiences. If we just go on to the next one, please. Okay, so this is the related pencil drawing, which explores the pairing relationship between trees. And my final image, please. And finally, one of my autumnal oil paintings entitled As the Wind Traverses the Land, So the Breath of Life Passes On, which shows how sketches and field notes can be used in the studio to create large and complex oil paintings. Complex, both in formal terms of colour modulations, mark making, and spatial geometry, and that my paintings also give visual expression to the many contemporary issues, ideas, and experiences which being with trees offer us.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Angela. They're wonderful. And the sunshine, I was missing today is beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we're moving on now to Philippa. It's a very tight timetable, so I'm rushing on through to Philippa Beale, who's talking about her work with trees, people, and the group known as the Arborealists. Philippa, I don't know if you're ready to start.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's wonderful.
Okay. To start off with, we are called the Arborealists. And the reason that we have that name is because it works in several of the Latin languages, but most particularly French. So today I'm going to take you through the story of how the Arborealists started and how it has evolved through books. Because if anybody would perhaps like to buy the books, then I'm sure that I will be able to tell them where they are available, and they're not expensive and they are contemporary. To start off with, I'd just like to tell you a bit about my own background. For many years, I was Director of Studies in Fine Art and other courses at Central St Martin's College of Art and Design. I retired in 2005 and I started moving from what we would refer to as a conceptual practice into drawing in plein air, that's out in the open air, and starting to draw trees. I thought to myself at the time, I won't get very well recognized for doing this. And so it was to my surprise when I entered to have my work put in an international book called The State of Art, which you can still buy. I'm showing it to you here. And not only was my work accepted, but several other artists who were drawing and painting trees also. And I thought to myself, times are a-changing. If people are interested in landscape and trees, which they hadn't been really for quite a time. I wanted to pick up on two things that Susie Turner said as about why the Arborealists started to form themselves. Yes, it is true that abstract painting is very often influenced by landscape. And the thing about landscape is that it has horizontal lines in it. And the important thing about painting trees is that the lines are vertical. And that very interesting fact, I know, has influenced a lot of the Arborealists. In 2013, an old friend of mine called Tim Craven and his colleague, who is curator of a gallery in the New Forest, very apposite, put together an exhibition called Under the Greenwood, and you can still buy this beautiful book, Under the Greenwood, from the gallery and from Amazon. And the exhibition was in 2 parts. It was called Picturing the British Tree from Constable to Kirk Jackson. And the first part was sorry? All right. Okay, the first part.
Philip.
Yeah. Am I with you?
Yes, that's better. Thank you, Philippa.
All right. And so the first part was, as has been previously explained, was artists who had been painting in the mainly the 18th and 19th century. But the second part, Steve Marshall and Tim Craven had chosen artists who were working with painting trees at that time. And they invited me to be part of that exhibition, but along with other artists like David Nash, and I'd like to show you the David Nash because this bears out exactly what Susie Turner was saying, that the paintings of the artists were very often abstract and also about single trees standing in singular vertical forms.
Philippa, sorry, as chair, sorry, I think you, just to let you know, you've only got a minute left.
Okay, well, I still want to show you my books.
Yes, well, yeah,
I'll whip through them quickly. Thank you. Okay,
we can come back to them later too.
So all these books are available to people. So the success of the Arborealists took off from 2013, and since then they have published 6 books, all of which are available. And I'd like to show you the books. This one, in which Angela Summerfield has written, is called The Arborealists, The Art of Trees. This one is called Being with Trees. And this one is also called Being with Trees. And there's going to be an exhibition around this in January at the Bermondsey Project Space. There are 50 arborealists at the moment who belong to this movement, and the purpose of the arborealists is to carry forward tree painting for the most part into the 21st century.
That's wonderful, Philippa. Thank you very much. And you didn't mention the latest book, Art Meets Ecology, by George Peterkin, Tim Craven and Christiana Payne.
I didn't have time.
Which just came out. I just thought I'd mention it for you.
Okay.
Now we've got to move on very quickly to Angela Rumble, who's going to tell us why trees are such an important and vibrant subject in her work. Thank you very much.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Oh, hello. Yes, the reason I've been asked to talk today is because of the exhibition I've got on at the moment, along with Philippa at the Bermondsey Project Space. It's obviously been closed for a month, but it's reopening on Wednesday through to Saturday next week. So if anybody's in London and can get along next week, we'd be very pleased to see you. I'm afraid I don't have any illustrations to show you, but there's a catalogue available for the exhibition, which you might be able to share afterwards. My exhibition is entitled Treescapes. I'm showing paintings which are more or less abstract, but all tree related. About half the paintings were produced in the first lockdown, and they're all based on trees and woodland around my home. Oh, there are some illustrations, sorry. I'm also showing what I call tree pots, which are made by impressing clay into a lino cut before hand building the pot. For people that don't know me, I often introduce myself as half artist, half dentist. The balance of this has changed over the years, and I now find myself full-time artist, thanks very much to COVID for the final push. I did what was considered to be the sensible thing, and I studied dentistry straight from school and spent most of this career in general practice. I count myself very lucky that the art school in Canterbury started a part-time degree course, and by doing an access course first and an MA after the BA and a residency after that, I managed to stretch this out for a whole decade as I was having such a good time. This was the 1990s, and at the time, studying fine art was a very serious business full of issues and French philosophy. I made sense of my split career by painting medical subjects, particularly using old medical photographs and textbooks that I found in the Wellcome Trust library. After art school, I started to leave things out. First of all, the people and then the buildings, but the trees never got left out. People often said that they found my paintings unsettling, and it was pointed out to me that this happened just as much with the tree paintings as the medical ones. Realizing this helped me to stop worrying so much about meaning and just concentrate on the making. I've always spent a lot of time in the woods, and this happened more than ever in lockdown. I'm lucky to live close to Blean Woods, where I can and do still occasionally get lost in them. Trees of everything a painter could possibly want. I'm endlessly fascinated by the tangles and patterns. There's light and shade. There are more variations of line and tone than could ever be used. If you want symbolism or metaphor or motion and feeling, just look at Van Gogh's trees, which make up the subject of a quarter of his paintings. Something I've noticed in particular is the different feel of different woods. Our local woods are deciduous, mainly oak, beech and chestnut. They're really quite benign, even when you're not quite sure where you are. The changing seasons give a sense of growth and renewal. A bit further afield, there are some positively brutal coniferous woods that I found so spooky at dusk that I practically ran out of them. Great for straight lines and more geometric images, but also the stuff of nightmares. I don't know if any of you made it to the Hayward Gallery's exhibition Among the Trees, which has recently finished. One of the artists there was Thomas Strutt, who showed some absolutely massive photographs of forests and whose observations summed up a lot of what I think motivates me. He says that he had the idea to make pictures that would be very full, very crowded with information, and which would make you surrender to the act of observation rather than interpretation. I myself am not interested in illustration or in categorization or really in realism. Half the time I don't really know what I want, and often I'm literally painting this confusion. I often remove the horizon to make the image more all over. This way there is no foreground or background. I can explore the mark making and go as far as I want into abstraction without losing a recognizable subject. Sometimes this goes too far and has to be brought back for the painting to work. Sometimes I include printed elements which add to the random nature of some of the marks. It's exploring the boundary between figuration and abstraction that I find endlessly fascinating. It's impossible to capture the feel or scale of the forest, only maybe to hopefully capture something of their essence. It's the impossibility of this and the endless swinging between the anticipation of what might happen and the frustrations of painting that I can't leave alone. On a good day, I can get just as lost in a painting as I can in the woods. And at times like these, that has to be a good thing.
Thank you very much, Angela. That's wonderful. So we've now, we've had 4 great presentations from artists, and we've now going on to question and answer session. Now, I don't know if any questions have come in. Let me look. Dom.
There is some really great questions here. I would encourage people to continue sending them in. One really great question, if I can just read out, is from David Carey. How best to encourage many more people to engage in their own artistic appreciation of trees, even if they themselves are not experienced or professional artists? They're tricky things to satisfactorily depict.
Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? And of course, one way, I mean, of course, if we include photography as art, which I think we can, then one very interesting thing, I was in a park in Nottingham this afternoon, and the number of people step in a misty day, taking care to take pictures of tree bark, parakeets in the trees, remarkable. And so I presume they're going to go on Instagram or something like that. But I think but very relatively few people sketching, possibly because it was a rather damp afternoon. But I don't know whether we do how often one does see people sketching in the woods. What do other people think?
Yeah.
Oh, I think we as artists should respond to that.
Yes.
We of course go out properly attired, you see. That's why we can sketch and paint in all weathers.
Yes, absolutely. But it's that sense when the paper gets a bit soggy, I imagine. That,
oh, we keep on drawing.
What kind of satisfaction do you think it brings to have a go, even if you're not a trained artist?
Ah, well, perhaps, Philippa, would you like to say something about that because of your vast experience of teaching?
You're on mute, Philippa.
you need to make yourself unmute. That's it. That's it.
I think there are many part-time classes available throughout the country where people are encouraging their students to go out in small groups to draw and paint outside. And the answer to the problem of the weather is that one can buy an umbrella that actually will strap onto a small stool or deck chair, and you just go on painting under the umbrella. Excellent. It's quite cozy.
And of course, you could look at, as someone pointed out in the chat, you can buy, for example, Alexander Cosden's piece from 1771 online, a cheap copy, and you can learn if it's pouring with rain. I don't know why I'm going on about weather, but if it's torrential rain, you can learn from books as well as going out in the field as well. I imagine.
I could just leap in with I know we've been fairly humorous about this, but very quickly, because a lot of people are daunted about painting and drawing, is that 2 tips would be, is one to think when you're looking at trees and looking through the branches, to concentrate on drawing the spaces between the branches and the twigs. That's a very interesting way to approach the subject, rather than thinking of drawing an object. And also to, if you don't mind people giving you strange looks, is to actually mimic yourself the movement of the branches. And that's a very easy way of understanding things, rather than this tendency to think, oh, I can't quite understand what's happening to, or a way of understanding the tree growth, in other words.
There's a question here from Caroline Summerfield. Do contemporary artists approach the portrayal of trees differently from artists in earlier eras or earlier times?
Oh, I would say so. Yes, I would say so. I think that contemporary artists are trying to evolve new ways of painting trees, not just reiterating the kind of trees that were painted in the 17th, 18th and 19th century, which were to, and I don't say this in a derogatory fashion, but which were to a great extent illustrative. Even if you were constable and moving one tree from one place to another, you were explaining, you know, the life of that particular tree. Whereas contemporary artists, I should think since the war, remember what Churchill said. During the war, of course, we demolished great, vast amount of lovely avenues of trees because they made such good aircraft runways, especially secret aircraft runways, which we needed. And people in government were saying, well, we must photograph these. And Winston Churchill said, no, we must get them painted by war artists, because only artists can portray the loss and the loss of these trees. And I think that, you know, that is what the arborealists are often doing. They're capturing woods and trees that are actually disappearing because of different aspects of what is happening in the country at the moment, cutting down trees in order to put up pylons, in order to put in railways. And so wherever that happens, you will find artists going there to record the loss.
We've got another question here about, have any of you got particular individual trees that stimulated you to want to paint trees from that you remember? Angela, have you got to?
Well, I've been painting a tree at East Ling Church, an old yew tree that I think is over 2,000 years old, and it's so massive that you can't capture it at all. You have to just kind of get a sense of it. Wonderful. But I don't worry too much about that, because the tree can't criticise me if I don't make it look right.
You just raised an interesting point very quickly about the whole autobiographical nature of painting, which painting and drawing, which all artists are aware of. I mean, they're from Rembrandt onwards. So that's an interesting question.
The other thing about painting trees is to start in the winter, because if you want to discover the structure of a tree, then to see it after a leaf fall is a lot easier. And once you can draw the skeleton, then going out in the summer, it becomes easier. But if you just go out there and you'll see this massive green, it's so frightening that I don't think that put a lot of people off. So we'll get moving into winter, so lots of warm clothes. And I do plead you to go out and look at the real trees and not stay indoors and look at books. Books are lovely, but the only way to get to know your tree is to be in front of it and draw it.
That's wonderful. Now, I think I've got a feeling, I'm looking across at Sarah, I've got a feeling we might be out of time. I've been told we've got to be very strictly keeping to time.
I just wanted to ask Susie a question.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yes.
You have your gallery and you have the public who come in and they obviously connect. And I was wondering to what extent they connect with the style of painting and to what extent they connect with that particular tree because they've loved it forever. It'd be interesting just to hear what people's reaction is when they come into the gallery. You're on mute at the moment.
Thanks. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. No, it's a really interesting question. I think I would say on balance that people are connecting to the work itself rather than to a particular tree. So people are, drawn to the structure of a painting or a drawing. They're drawn to the colours. They're drawn to the shapes. And they're drawn, and this is the really powerful thing I think about art, they're drawn to the emotions that the picture sends out. And they could be very personal. They may not even be describable. So for me, it's that. I mean, very occasionally, there are very figurative works that we've had that are of specific trees. And yes, maybe somebody wants that tree because it's, here we get to the emotion again, because it is a memory of that tree. Perhaps they've been visiting somewhere in Suffolk, maybe they've been visiting the cliffs at Bordsey, and they want to buy a picture of one of those pine trees standing precariously on that cliff.
Oh, thank you very much.
Absolutely. And can I just say, in the chat, well, it was, I don't know if it's gone now, there were lots of comments from people about recommendations for other things to look at. So it might be worth looking at that in the future.
Lots of links and connections.
Yes.
Very, very sadly, we've come to the end of tonight's exploration of trees in art. And it is time to say farewell. I think we're just being put on the big screen again. Yes, visit these wonderful exhibitions if restrictions allow. And thank you to you, our audience, for being with us. And thank you so much to our 4 fantastic artists and to Charles for chairing us. And do watch out on the Tree Council social media over the coming week. There are lots of new events coming up all the time. And you can sign up and you'll be able to hear a recording of this. If you want to look at some of it again, it will be up online on our website for the next couple of weeks. If you're sitting at home, please give our panel a big round of applause. We've really, really enjoyed looking at your work, at the colour, at the emotion, at the history, and all the different kinds of trees. So thank you very much. Good night to everybody. Do please join us again soon. And thank you, the panel. Thank you to Dom and Holly, who've done so much to put this event together. And thank you to you, our audience. Have a very good evening. Thank you and bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye. Goodbye.
Thanks very much. Nice to meet you all.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.